Commander stepped off the shuttle and felt the strange air of Earth fill his lungs for the first time. The planet was beautiful in a wild and untamed way that made him uncomfortable. Green forests covered the hills around him. A river flowed in the distance. Birds sang in the trees. It looked peaceful, knew better than to trust appearances. He had served the Empire for 40 years. He had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. He had faced enemies that would haunt the nightmares of lesser beings. The High Council had sent him to Earth because they trusted his judgment. Humanity had made first contact with the only 2 years ago. The Council needed to know if these strange creatures from a small blue world posed any threat to galactic order. Was here to find out. A human woman walked toward him across the landing pad. She wore a formal military uniform and moved with the confidence of someone who had earned her rank through hard service. Her hair was brown and cut short. Her eyes were green and calm. She smiled as she approached, and something about that smile made him feel like prey. "Commander," she said, "welcome to Earth. I am Captain Laura. I will be your liaison during your observation period." Studied her carefully. She was smaller than him by a full head. Her body was soft compared to the armored scales that covered skin. She had no claws, no fangs, no natural weapons of any kind. By every measure that mattered, she should not have made him nervous, but she did. "Thank you, Captain," replied. "I look forward to learning about your military training methods." Nodded and gestured toward a waiting vehicle. "We have a long drive to the academy. I thought we could use the time to discuss what you hope to observe." They climbed into the vehicle and began their journey. Watched the human landscape pass by his window. He saw cities filled with millions of people living side by side. He saw farms stretching across wide valleys. He saw children playing in open fields. Everything looked so normal, so harmless. He reminded himself that looks could deceive. "The Academy has been training officers for over 200 years, explained as they drove. "It is one of the oldest military institutions on Earth." Processed this information carefully. 200 years. The rarely maintained any single institution for more than 50 years before reforming or replacing it. Humans seemed to value tradition in ways his people did not understand. "What do your cadets learn at this academy?" he asked. "Everything," replied. "Tactics, strategy, leadership, history, science, ethics. We believe that a good officer must be educated in all areas of knowledge." Found this strange. Officers learned to fight and to command. They did not waste time on philosophy or history. Soldiers needed to obey orders, not think about them, but he kept his opinions to himself. He was here to observe, not to judge. They arrived at the academy as the sun began to set. Saw buildings made of gray stone arranged around wide green fields. Young humans in matching uniforms walked between the buildings in organized groups. They moved with purpose and discipline. Noted that their posture was excellent. Their eyes were alert. They looked like soldiers, even though most of them appeared very young. Led him to his quarters, a simple room with a bed, a desk, and a window overlooking the training grounds. She told him that the official tour would begin in the morning, thanked her and prepared to rest. He could not sleep. Something about this place bothered him in ways he could not explain. He stood at his window and watched the academy grounds in the darkness. He expected to see nothing. Instead, he saw lights burning in dozens of windows. He saw cadets walking between buildings even in the middle of the night. He saw figures running along the paths in the cold darkness. Why were they awake? Why were they training when they should be resting? Had commanded soldiers from many species. All of them valued rest. All of them protected their recovery time. But these young humans were choosing to work when they could sleep. They were pushing themselves beyond what duty required. He watched until the early hours of morning. The lights never went out completely. The movement never stopped. These humans treated exhaustion as a challenge to overcome rather than a limit to respect. Made his first note in the observation report he would send to high command. The next morning came too quickly. Had managed only a few hours of sleep, but he forced himself to appear alert when came to collect him. She looked fresh and rested. He wondered if she had slept at all or if she was simply better at hiding her fatigue. "The cadets begin their day early," she said as they walked across the grounds. "Physical training starts before sunrise." Saw what she meant. Hundreds of young humans ran in formation across the training fields. Their breath made clouds in the cold morning air. Their feet pounded against the ground in perfect rhythm. They had been running for some time, he realized. Their faces were red. Their bodies were covered in sweat. but they kept running. He watched a young man stumble and nearly fall. The cadets beside him immediately grabbed his arms and helped him regain his balance. They did not leave him behind. They did not slow down. They simply carried him forward until he could run on his own again. "Why do they help him?" asked. "In training, the weak are left to fail. It teaches them to be stronger." Considered the question before answering. "We believe that strength comes from unity. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, so we make every link stronger." The running ended eventually. The cadets gathered in formation and began a series of physical exercises that looked brutal. They lifted their own body weight. They held painful positions until their muscles trembled. They pushed themselves to the point of failure and then pushed further. Notice something else. The instructors did every exercise alongside the cadets. They suffered the same pain. They showed the same effort. They led by example rather than by command. This was not how officers trained their soldiers. The morning continued with weapons training, tactical simulations, and classroom instruction. Observed everything with growing unease. These humans were not just learning to fight. They were learning to think, to adapt, to lead. They were being forged into something more dangerous than simple soldiers. By the end of the first day, had filled his data tablet with observations. He sat alone in his quarters and composed his first report to high command. He chose his words carefully. He did not want to cause panic, but he needed the council to understand what he was seeing. "The humans are more formidable than initial assessments suggested," he wrote. "Their training methods are extreme but effective. Their soldiers demonstrate unusual levels of loyalty and endurance. I recommend that all diplomatic approaches proceed with extreme caution. This species should not be underestimated." He transmitted the report and stared out his window at the academy grounds. The lights were still burning. The cadets were still working. Realized that he had not seen a single human rest for more than a few minutes since his arrival. These creatures did not know how to stop. They did not know how to quit. And that, more than any weapon or technology, was what made them terrifying. Began his second week at the academy with a new purpose. He had seen how the humans trained their bodies. Now he wanted to understand how they trained their minds. Captain arranged for him to attend classes alongside the cadets. She seemed pleased that he was taking such interest in their education system. Did not tell her that his interest came from fear rather than admiration. The first class he attended was military history, expected to learn about human victories against alien enemies. Instead, he found himself listening to a detailed analysis of a war that humans had fought against each other. The instructor, a gray-haired man named Colonel Peters, spoke about something called the Second World War. He described battles, strategies, and the terrible cost of the conflict. Millions of humans had died fighting other humans. Was confused. Why would a military academy teach its students about failures and losses? Training focused only on victories. Soldiers needed confidence, not reminders of past mistakes. But the cadets listened with intense focus. They took notes. They asked questions. They seemed hungry to understand every detail of this ancient tragedy. A young cadet named Daniel Perry sat beside during the lesson. He noticed the aliens' confusion and leaned over to explain. "We study our failures more than our successes," Perry said quietly. "You learn more from losing than from winning." "But does this not weaken your soldiers?" asked. "Does it not make them doubt themselves?" Perry shook his head. "It makes us humble. It reminds us that even the best armies can fail if they become too proud. We never want to repeat the mistakes of the past." Considered this as the lesson continued. They believed in confidence and strength. They taught their warriors that failure was unacceptable, but humans taught their warriors that failure was inevitable, and that wisdom came from understanding why failure happened. It was a completely different approach to military education. The next class was even more surprising. Found himself in a philosophy seminar led by a female instructor named Professor. The cadets discussed concepts like ethics, justice, and the morality of warfare. They debated when it was right to fight and when it was wrong. They questioned whether certain tactics were acceptable even if they led to victory. Could not believe what he was hearing. Soldiers did not question orders. They did not worry about ethics. They fought when commanded to fight and stopped when commanded to stop. But these human cadets were being taught to think for themselves. They were being given the tools to challenge authority if that authority acted wrongly. He spoke with Perry again after the class ended. "Why do your soldiers need philosophy?" he asked. Is it not simpler to just follow orders? Perry thought carefully before answering. A soldier who does not understand why he fights is just a weapon. He can be pointed at anything and told to kill. But a soldier who understands ethics becomes a guardian. He knows what he is protecting and why it matters. He will fight harder for something he believes in. But what if a soldier disagrees with his orders? Pressed. What if his ethics tell him not to fight? Then he has a duty to refuse, Perry said simply. We believe that every soldier is responsible for his own actions. Following orders is not an excuse for doing evil. Felt a chill run through his scales. In the Empire, refusing orders meant death. Soldiers were expected to obey without question. But humans created soldiers who could think, who could judge, who could refuse. This was either the greatest strength or the greatest weakness he had ever seen in a military system. He was not sure which. The week continued with more classes, more observations, and more disturbing discoveries. Attended a leadership seminar taught by Colonel Amy. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a voice that commanded attention. Her class focused on decision-making under pressure. Presented her students with scenarios that had no good solutions. In every case, people would die no matter what choice the leader made. The cadets had to decide who would live and who would die. They had to accept responsibility for those deaths. They had to carry that weight and keep functioning. Watched young humans wrestle with impossible choices. He saw them struggle, doubt themselves, and sometimes break down. But they always recovered. They always made a decision. They always took responsibility for the consequences. Told them that leadership meant accepting burdens that would crush ordinary people. The cadets nodded as if this were obvious. One scenario particularly disturbed. A cadet named Lisa Monroe had to choose between saving 10 soldiers or one civilian child. There was no way to save both. Monroe chose to save the child. When asked why, Monroe explained that the soldiers had accepted the risk of death when they joined the military. The child had not. The soldiers would want her to save the innocent. Other cadets disagreed. They argued that saving more lives was always the right choice. The debate grew heated. Students challenged each other with passion and intelligence. Let them argue without interference. She wanted them to think, to struggle, to find their own answers. Realized something profound as he watched the debate. These humans were not being trained to follow a single doctrine. They were being trained to face moral complexity. They were learning that war was not simple, that choices had consequences, and that leaders had to live with those consequences forever. He noticed something else during his second week at the academy. The cadets helped each other constantly. Students who excelled in physical training would coach those who struggled. Students who understood tactics would tutor those who found them difficult. There was no competition to be the best individual. Instead, everyone worked to make everyone else stronger. Perry explained this when asked about it. "We will fight together someday," the young cadet said. "When that day comes, I want everyone around me to be as skilled as possible. If I help my classmates now, they will be better soldiers later. And better soldiers mean more of us survive." It was practical logic, admitted, but it was also something more. These humans genuinely cared about each other. They formed bonds that went beyond duty or convenience. They became something like a family. Sent his second report to High Command that night. He wrote about the human education system and its strange emphasis on history, philosophy, and ethics. He described the way cadets helped each other and formed tight bonds. He explained that human soldiers were not just warriors but thinkers, guardians, and members of a community. Their training creates soldiers who are capable of independent judgment, he wrote. This means they cannot be easily controlled or manipulated. They will not commit atrocities even if ordered to do so. But it also means they will fight with conviction and creativity. They will adapt to any situation. They will find ways to win that other species would never consider. He paused before adding his final observation. "I am beginning to understand why humans have survived on their dangerous world for so long. They do not just train soldiers, they train leaders, every single one of them." He transmitted the report and wondered what the High Council would think. He suspected they would find his observations as troubling as he did. Captain woke before dawn on the first day of his third week. She told him that the cadets were starting a field training exercise and that he was invited to observe. Dressed quickly and followed her to a transport vehicle. Several other officers were already waiting inside. They looked tired but eager. "What exactly is this exercise?" asked as the vehicle began to move. The cadets will be dropped into wilderness terrain with minimal supplies, explained. They must complete a series of objectives while opposing forces hunt them. The exercise lasts 3 days. It tests everything they have learned so far. Nodded. Such exercises were common in military training across the galaxy, but he had learned to expect the unexpected from humans. He watched the landscape change outside the window as they drove deeper into the mountains. The terrain grew rough and wild. Trees covered the slopes. Rocks jutted from the earth at sharp angles. It looked like a difficult place to survive, let alone fight. They arrived at an observation post on a high ridge. From there, could watch the exercise unfold through monitoring equipment. The cadets had been divided into squads of 8. Each squad had a leader and specific objectives to complete. The opposing forces were experienced soldiers who knew the terrain well. The odds were not in the cadets' favor. Focused his attention on one squad in particular. Their leader was a young woman named Emma Collins. She was not the largest or strongest cadet in her group, but her followed her instructions without hesitation. They trusted her, wanted to understand why. The first day of the exercise went badly for most squads. The opposing forces were aggressive and effective. They ambushed cadets, captured objectives, and forced the young soldiers to constantly move and adapt. By nightfall, 3 squads had been eliminated. Only 5 remained in the field. Collins' squad was among the survivors. Watched them navigate through dense forest in the growing darkness. They moved quietly and carefully. Every member of the squad had a role and performed it perfectly. Collins made decisions quickly but not carelessly. She listened to her before choosing a course of action. On the morning of the second day, disaster struck. A tall young man named stepped badly on a loose rock and twisted his ankle. He fell to the ground with a cry of pain that he quickly stifled. His gathered around him, expected them to leave him behind. That was the practical choice. An injured soldier slowed everyone down and endangered the mission. But Collins did not leave him. "We carry him," she said firmly. "No one gets left behind." Her did not argue. 2 of them lifted between their shoulders and helped him move. The squad continued toward their objective, slower now but still together. Watched in amazement as they struggled through difficult terrain, refusing to abandon their injured comrade. "This is foolish," muttered to himself. "They will be caught because of him." Overheard his comment. "Watch," she said simply. The opposing forces found Collins' squad that afternoon. The hunters moved to surround them, cutting off their escape routes. Collins realized what was happening and made a quick decision. She led her squad into a narrow ravine where the enemy could not approach from multiple directions. It was a defensive position, but it was also a trap. They could not stay there forever. The standoff lasted for hours. The opposing forces tried several times to push into the ravine. Each time, Collins' squad drove them back. But the cadets were tired, hungry, and running low on supplies. His ankle was swelling badly. The situation looked hopeless. Leaned forward in his seat. He wanted to see what Collins would do when defeat became inevitable. He expected surrender or perhaps a desperate final charge. He did not expect what actually happened. As night fell, Collins gathered her squad together. She spoke to them quietly, her voice calm and confident. Could not hear her words through the monitoring equipment, but he could see the effect they had. The exhausted cadets straightened. Their eyes grew sharp. They nodded and began preparing for something. Collins waited until the deepest hour of the night. Then she led her squad out of the ravine through a route that should have been impossible. They climbed a steep rock face in complete darkness, helping up hand over hand. They moved so silently that the opposing forces did not hear them pass within meters of their positions. By dawn, Collins' squad was kilometers away and closing on their objective. Could not believe what he was seeing. These cadets had been cornered, outnumbered, and exhausted. They had an injured soldier who could barely walk. Every tactical analysis said they should fail, but they did not fail. They found a way through the impossible. The third day of the exercise belonged to Collins' squad. They completed their remaining objectives with efficiency that surprised even their instructors. They worked together seamlessly, each cadet anticipating the other's movements. Continued to fight despite his injury. He supported him whenever he needed help, but he refused to be a burden. He pushed through pain that would have stopped most soldiers. The exercise ended at sunset on the third day. Collins' squad was one of only 2 that completed all their objectives. They emerged from the forest tired, dirty, and triumphant. Their instructors congratulated them with rare smiles. Their fellow cadets cheered. Found Captain standing beside him at the observation post. The exercise was over. The cadets were returning to the academy, but could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed. How did they do it? He asked. They should have failed. Every calculation said they would fail. Smiled, they refused to fail. That is the human way. But refusing is not enough, protested. Reality does not care about refusal. The enemy does not care about determination. No, agreed. But determination gives you the strength to find a way when none seems to exist. It keeps you thinking when others would give up. It makes you dangerous even when you should be beaten. Considered her words as they drove back to the academy. He had seen soldiers surrender when the odds turned against them. He had seen other species accept defeat when victory seemed impossible. But these humans did not accept defeat. They did not surrender. They found ways to win that logic and reason. He found Collins that evening in the academy dining hall. She was eating a large meal with her, all of them celebrating their success. Approached her table and asked if he could speak with her. She agreed without hesitation. Why did you not leave behind? Asked. He slowed your squad. He endangered your mission. The logical choice was to continue without him. Collins looked at with confusion as if the question made no sense to her. He is one of us, she said. We do not leave our people behind, ever. But the mission, pressed, was the mission not more important? No mission is worth abandoning our own, Collins replied. If we leave one soldier behind today, we destroy the trust that holds us together. Next time, everyone will wonder if they will be the one left behind. That doubt is more dangerous than any enemy. Nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand. Human strength did not come from individuals. It came from the bonds between them. Those bonds made them more than the sum of their parts. They made them unstoppable. He sent his third report to High Command that night. He wrote about the field exercise and what he had witnessed. He described the impossible escape from the ravine. He explained the human refusal to abandon their wounded. These humans will never break as long as they remain united, he concluded. Their loyalty to each other is absolute. They will die before they abandon a comrade. This makes them predictable in some ways but terrifying in others. An army might be defeated by killing enough soldiers. A human army might fight to the last soldier and still find a way to win. I do not know how to defeat such an enemy. I am not sure it is possible. Changed his approach during his 4th week at the academy. He stopped observing from a distance and began asking questions directly. He wanted to understand not just what humans did, but why they did it. The answers he received disturbed him more than anything he had witnessed in combat. He started with the cadets themselves. He asked them why they had chosen to become soldiers. In the Empire, military service was mandatory for certain castes. Soldiers fought because they had no choice, but humans were different. These young people had volunteered. They had chosen a life of hardship, danger, and potential death. Needed to know why. A cadet named Brooks was willing to talk. He was a quiet young man with serious eyes and a steady voice. His family had produced soldiers for 3 generations. His grandfather had fought in a war called Vietnam. His father had served in conflicts across a region called the Middle East. Both men had seen terrible things. Both men had lost friends. And yet Brooks had still chosen to follow in their footsteps. My grandfather used to tell me stories, Brooks explained as they walked across the academy grounds. He talked about the fear, the pain, the loss. He did not hide the cost of service, but he also told me about the men he served with. He said they were the finest people he ever knew. He said the bonds forged in battle lasted a lifetime. But he suffered, said. Your father suffered. Why would you choose the same suffering? Brooks stopped walking and looked at directly. Someone must stand between danger and those who cannot protect themselves. That is what my grandfather taught me. That is what my father taught me. It is simply what my family does. We protect others so they can live in peace. Struggled to understand this concept. Soldiers fought for glory, resources, and the expansion of their empire. They did not fight to protect strangers. They did not sacrifice themselves for abstract ideals like peace or safety. But Brooks spoke of protection as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He spoke with other cadets throughout the week. Each conversation revealed new layers of human motivation. Some cadets came from wealthy families and could have lived lives of comfort. They chose service instead because they felt a duty to give back to their society. Others came from poor backgrounds and saw military service as a path to education and opportunity. But even they spoke of wanting to make a difference, to matter, to protect. One conversation stayed with longer than the others. A young woman named Maria Santos told him about her older brother. He had been a soldier in a conflict overseas. He had died saving the lives of civilians caught in a battle zone. Santos joined the academy because she wanted to honor his memory. She wanted to continue his mission of protecting the innocent. "Are you not angry?" asked her. "Your brother died, your family lost him. How can you choose the same path that killed him?" Santos smiled sadly. "I was angry for a long time, but then I realized that my brother died doing exactly what he believed in. He saved 12 people that day. 12 families still have their loved ones because of him. How can I be angry at such a beautiful sacrifice?" Did not have an answer. He had seen soldiers die in battle many times. Their deaths were mourned briefly and then forgotten. No one called them beautiful. No one felt grateful. Death was simply the cost of service, nothing more. Later that week, attended a memorial ceremony. The academy held such ceremonies regularly to honor graduates who had fallen in battle, expected a brief formal acknowledgement. Instead, he witnessed something that shook him to his core. The ceremony took place at sunset. Hundreds of cadets stood in perfect formation on the parade ground. They wore their finest uniforms. Their faces were solemn. An officer read the names of the fallen one by one. After each name, a bell rang once. The sound echoed across the grounds and faded into silence. But the ceremony did not end there. After the names were read, cadets stepped forward to share stories about the fallen. They spoke of bravery, kindness, and sacrifice. They talked about soldiers who had saved lives, protected civilians, and died for their comrades. They made the dead come alive through their words. Watched young humans weep openly for people they had never met. They cried for soldiers who had graduated years before they arrived. They promised to live up to the legacy of the fallen. They swore that the sacrifice would not be forgotten. One story affected deeply. A cadet spoke about a graduate named Lieutenant Palmer who had died 3 years ago. Palmer had been leading his unit through hostile territory when they were ambushed. He had ordered his soldiers to retreat while he provided cover. He held his position alone against overwhelming numbers, buying time for his unit to escape. He knew he would die. He did it anyway. Lieutenant Palmer saved 11 lives that day, the cadet concluded. Those 11 soldiers went home to their families. They had children who would never have been born if Palmer had not sacrificed himself. He did not just save 11 people, he saved generations. The ceremony ended with the cadets singing a slow, sad song about fallen comrades. Their voices blended together in the gathering darkness. Felt something strange stirring in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. It was respect. He sought out Colonel Amy after the ceremony. She was standing alone near the memorial wall, looking at the names carved in stone, approached carefully and asked if he could speak with her. "Of course, Commander," said. "What is on your mind?" "I have observed your academy for almost a month now," said slowly. "I have seen your training methods, your education system, your field exercises. But tonight I finally understand something important." "What is that?" "You are not creating weapons," said. "You are creating guardians. There is a difference." Nodded. "A weapon is pointed at an enemy and released. It has no judgment, no conscience, no purpose beyond destruction. A guardian chooses what to protect and why. A guardian understands the value of what they defend. That understanding makes them fight harder." Thought about the military. His people trained soldiers to obey orders and destroy enemies. They did not train guardians. They did not teach soldiers to value anything beyond victory. Perhaps that was why armies conquered quickly but struggled to hold territory. They broke things efficiently but could not build anything lasting. "Your soldiers will never break," said quietly. "As long as they have something to protect, they will keep fighting." "Yes," agreed. "That is exactly right. And there is always something to protect. A nation, a family, an idea, a stranger. As long as humans have love in their hearts, they will fight to defend it." Returned to his quarters that night with his thoughts in chaos. He had come to Earth expecting to find weaknesses he could exploit. Instead, he had found strengths he could not overcome. Human soldiers were not just dangerous because of their training or their technology. They were dangerous because they cared. They fought for reasons that gave them unlimited determination. He wrote his fourth report to High Command with hands that trembled slightly. He described the memorial ceremony and the stories of sacrifice. He explained the concept of guardians versus weapons. He reported that human military culture was built on love rather than fear. "I have fought many species across many worlds," he wrote. "I have defeated enemies with superior technology, greater numbers, and stronger bodies. But I have never faced an enemy that fights for the reasons humans fight. They do not seek conquest or glory. They protect what they love. And love, I am learning, is the most powerful force in the universe." He stared at the words for a long time before sending the report. He knew the High Council would struggle to understand. Love was not a military concept in doctrine, but was beginning to think that perhaps it should be. The final days of his observation passed quickly. He spent them walking the academy grounds alone, thinking about everything he had witnessed. The cadets had grown accustomed to his presence. Some of them even greeted him by name when they passed. He had become a familiar figure in their world, and they had stopped seeing him as a threat. This troubled in ways he could not fully explain. Captain found him on his last evening standing near the memorial wall. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The names of the fallen caught the dying light and seemed to glow. "Your shuttle leaves tomorrow morning," said. "Are you ready to return home?" "I do not know," admitted. "I came here expecting to find weaknesses. I found none. I came here expecting to understand humans. I understand them less now than when I arrived." Smiled at this. "That is perhaps the most honest thing you have said since you arrived. Humans are complicated. We do not always understand ourselves." Turned to face her. "Your people terrify me, Captain, not because of your weapons or your technology. Those are inferior to ours, but because of everything else. Your determination, your bonds, your willingness to sacrifice. I do not know how to fight an enemy like that." "Then perhaps you should not fight us at all," suggested. The idea had been growing in his mind for weeks. He had been sent to evaluate humanity as a potential threat. The High Council expected a tactical assessment, a list of weaknesses to exploit if war became necessary, but could not give them what they wanted. The truth was simpler and more frightening. "I will recommend peace," he said. "Permanent, unconditional peace. The Empire has nothing to gain from war with humanity and everything to lose." His expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. "That is a wise decision, Commander. We do not want war with anyone. We have had enough war among ourselves to last many lifetimes, but we will fight if we must." "I know," said. "That is exactly why we must not give you a reason." That night the Academy held a farewell dinner in his honor. He had not expected such a gesture. He was a representative of a potentially hostile empire, not a friend. But the humans treated him as a guest. They welcomed him to their table and shared their food. They told him stories and asked about his home world. They behaved as if he were already an ally rather than a possible enemy. Cadet Emma Collins approached him during the meal. She was the young leader he had watched during the field exercise, the one who had refused to leave her injured behind. She looked healthier now, rested and fed, but her eyes still held that same fierce determination. "Commander," she said, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "What will you tell your people about us, about humans?" Considered the question carefully. He had been asking himself the same thing for days. The answer was important. It would shape relations between their species for generations. "I will tell them the truth," he said finally. "I will tell them that humans are more dangerous than any species we have ever encountered, not because of your armies or your weapons. Those are merely adequate, but because of why you fight." Collins frowned slightly. "Is that a compliment?" "It is a warning," replied, "and also the highest praise my people can offer. We respect strength in all its forms. We have simply never seen strength like yours before." He continued before she could respond. "You endure pain that would break other species. You sacrifice for each other without hesitation. You learn from your failures rather than hiding from them. You train your soldiers to think rather than just obey, and you never ever give up. Not when you are tired, not when you are outnumbered, not when victory seems impossible." Collins smiled slightly. "We call it stubbornness. My instructors sometimes wish we had less of it." "Your instructors are wise to encourage it," said. "Stubbornness has kept your species alive on a planet that should have killed you many times. It will serve you well among the stars." The dinner ended late, returned to his quarters and began composing his final report. He worked through the night, choosing every word with care. This document would determine whether the Empire pursued peace or prepared for war, knew which path he wanted his people to take. He described everything he had witnessed over the past month. the physical training that pushed cadets beyond their limits, the education that created thinkers rather than followers, the field exercises that forged unbreakable bonds, the memorial ceremonies that honored the fallen, the love that drove every soldier to protect what mattered most. Humanity presents a unique challenge for the Empire, he wrote in his conclusion. Their technology is inferior, their numbers are smaller, their physical abilities are unremarkable. By conventional analysis, they should pose no threat, but conventional analysis fails to account for the human spirit. He paused, gathering his thoughts before continuing. Humans do not fight like other species. They do not seek conquest or resources. They fight to protect what they love, and they will never stop fighting as long as that love exists. They carry the memories of their ancestors and the hopes of their descendants into every battle. They form bonds that make them stronger together than they could ever be apart. They refuse to accept defeat even when defeat is certain. Saved the document and added his final recommendation. I strongly advise the High Council to pursue peaceful relations with humanity, make them allies if possible, trading partners at minimum. If neither of those options is acceptable, then leave them alone entirely. Do not provoke them. Do not threaten them. Do not give them a reason to fight us, because if we become their enemy, they will never stop until one of our species is destroyed, and I am no longer certain that species would be theirs. He transmitted the report as the sun began to rise over the mountains. His work was done. Whatever happened next was in the hands of the High Council. Captain met him at the shuttle pad that morning. She shook his hand in the human fashion and wished him safe travels, thanked her for her hospitality and her patience with his endless questions. She laughed and said that curious guests were always welcome. The shuttle lifted off and carried away from Earth. He watched the blue planet shrink in the distance, its clouds and oceans beautiful against the blackness of space. Somewhere down there, young humans were training to become soldiers. They were learning to think, to lead, to sacrifice. They were becoming guardians. Opened the gift the Academy had given him at his farewell dinner. It was a book of human military history, thousands of pages documenting wars and warriors across. He began reading during the long journey home. He filled data tablets with notes and questions. He realized he would spend years studying humanity and still only scratch the surface. The High Council received his report 3 weeks later. They debated its contents for many days. Some members argued that humanity should be conquered before they became too powerful. Others insisted that the threat was exaggerated, but the majority listened to his warnings. They remembered his 40 years of loyal service. They trusted his judgment. The vote was unanimous. The Empire would pursue peaceful relations with humanity. Trade agreements would be negotiated. Cultural exchanges would be arranged. And if any citizen harmed a human, they would face the harshest penalties under imperial law. Learned of the decision while reviewing his notes on human military strategy. He felt relief wash over him like a wave. Peace was possible. War was avoided. His mission had succeeded. A message arrived from the High Council the next day. They had a new assignment for him. Given his unique expertise and his obvious fascination with humanity, they were appointing him as permanent ambassador to Earth. He would return to the blue planet and spend the rest of his career building bridges between their species. Accepted without hesitation, he packed his belongings and boarded a shuttle bound for Earth. He carried his book of human military history and his tablets full of notes. He was still afraid of humanity. He suspected he always would be, but fear and respect could coexist. Fear and friendship could grow together. The shuttle descended through the clouds. The Academy appeared below, its stone buildings and green fields unchanged since his departure. Smiled as the landing pad came into view. He was home, or at least he was somewhere that might become home in time. Captain was waiting to greet him. She looked surprised when he stepped off the shuttle, then pleased. "Welcome back, Ambassador," she said. "We did not expect to see you again so soon." "Neither did I," admitted. "But there is still so much I do not understand about your species. I have many questions." Laughed. "Then you have come to the right place. We have nothing but time and answers." She led him across the parade ground toward the main buildings. Cadets stopped to stare at the returning alien. Some of them recognized him and waved back, still learning the gesture. He had a feeling he would be learning human customs for the rest of his life. He did not mind at all.